Welcome everyone to another edition of Stepping Up to the Plate. So glad you could join us here. This beautiful summer weather that we're enjoying here in Milton, Massachusetts. So glad you could join us to talk so many things going on in the world of sports, with the Stanley Cup finally decided and the team from the East that shall not be named here because I'm not a big fan of a couple of those guys there has won the cup and over the Edmonton Oilers. And a lot of other things going on. We had unbelievable Scotty Scheffler winning at the Travelers last week. We had the Red Sox. Jarren Duran looking very much like an all-star and playing very much like one. We'll discuss him as well, in addition to many other topics du jour with my main man, Al Prizzuti. And Al, I don't know how you felt about it. It was a bitter moment for me. To watch the Florida Panthers, I'll go ahead and name them. Florida Panthers hoisting the cup. I know they were there last year. I was happy for, Bruce Cassidy last year that he got it with the Vegas Knights, and that it came at the expense of the Florida Panthers brought me great joy. But I thought,
Well, I feel just the opposite. The reason why is...
Boo, hiss.
No, the only reason why I think of that, I would have liked to have seen the Oilers win normally, because the way they came back, and they played very well.
Yeah.
But in watching the series, even in the games that the Oilers won, Florida's a better team. I mean, let's be on about it.
Well, no doubt.
Now, the other reason why I like the fact that Florida won is because it's very, very difficult to win 2 years in a row. So they win this year, and now next year they might lose Reinhardt, who had, incidentally, 68 goals, 57 in the regular season and 11 in the playoffs. He's a free agent, so we won't see the same team next year, and hopefully they won't back up and win again. Now, if you want to seg to what the Bees did. The same night that Florida wins the Stanley Cup, the Bruins traded Linus Ullmark. Now, they had to trade Linus Ullmark. That wasn't even a consideration. We knew that was going to happen because he's making $5 million and he was coming up for next year where he could leave. Okay, so you're not going to pay Swayman $5 and him $5 and play $10 million to two goalies. So I was okay with them trading Ullmark. I'm not so sure I was happy
with the return,
with what they got. Now, I will say this: Joonas Korpisalo. Yeah. Well, here's the problem with him.
Yeah.
He had a good year 2 years ago. He had a miserable year, but so did Linus Ullmark with Buffalo. When you have a bad team, it's hard to figure out whether it's the defense, the checkers that come back, or the goaltender that loses. If you watch Florida wins because they're check all over the ice. So they make Bobrovsky, who's a good goaltender, a great goal, he's won 2 Vezinas, look even better.
Yeah. Now
the Bruins got Esna, who has never, ever had a problem developing goaltenders. If you look at the Bruins, I mean, they took Ullmark in, and Esna made him even a better goalie than what he is. Yeah. And you go all the way back to Tuukka and all the way back. Esna's been there.
Yeah.
So the problem I have with Korpisalo is that he's got a multi-year contract. So they were not going to bring Bussi. They signed Bussi, incidentally, but they were not going to bring Bussi up to be the backup to Swayman. You don't have a guy who's never played NHL be a backup. So they would have had to pay, let's put it this way, $2 million for a backup goaltender anyways.
So might as well.
So they paid $3 million because Ottawa's paying $1 million of that, $4 million.
So they're getting something in return. In
now the problem with it is that the Bruins are looking for cap space. That only brought about $1 million in cap space for the Bruins. That's all it brought.
But he was your most valuable chip, I would thought.
Yeah, but interesting.
You got a Vezina finalist.
Yeah, but you know what? Andrew Raycraft said it better than anybody when he said, goaltenders don't bring first-round draft picks. They never do. He said because they're an iffy. You know, so I think he's right. I think they could have got more. I think they could have actually traded him to Edmonton, but you know, what's his name, Draisaitl, who didn't have a tremendous.
Did you kind of sour on him as trade bait?
No, I like Draisaitl. You know who wants Draisaitl on the Bruins? Pasternak has said it a million times. Yeah. So you know what Draisaitl brings that a lot of guys don't bring is that he's a very aggressive kid. He's a Bruin. Yeah. You know, if you go back to the days where we had Sagan and the other kid, we wanted the other kid. We ended up with Sagan. Sagan was a Canadian-style player, fancy Dan, that type of thing. Looking like Esposito and Jean Rattel. Rattel was more of a fancy Dan, whereas Espo was a Bruin. Yeah. So the Bruins got this other kid, and it's kind of interesting. He's 6'4", he weighs 210, 215. He's a tough kid, okay? Which is everybody complains the Bruins aren't tough enough. Well, this kid is going to be tough. Yeah. The problem is he scored 5 goals.
Well,
so he's going to be a third or fourth line
offensive-minded thug, or?
But the other thing that they did was, and they haven't had a first-round draft pick since, and it was the 25th. You know who it was? The 25th draft pick was the last time the Bruins picked in the first round. Who was it?
Oh my God! I think you got me stumped here, Al.
Yeah, well, it's not an easy question. I didn't know this, but I found out.
All right, was it defenseman or forward?
Forward.
Bergeron? No.
David Pasternak.
Oh.
25th.
Wow.
So think about the 24 that went before him. So the Bruins, I think what the Bruins are going to do, I think they're still going to look around. They could turn around and swap Caprasalo for another goaltender, a backup goaltender, but move down, give up the 25th and maybe go to the 7th or 8th. You know, it's interesting. Ottawa had 2 draft picks in the first round, the 25th and I think the 8th.
Yeah.
They wouldn't give up the 8th.
No, of course not.
But they don't need, they're loaded with draft picks. I looked and saw, you know, the Bruins aren't.
They don't have draft capital. So, they need to create cap space. They're kind of in a bind a little bit. And then, but that's my point here is that, you know, you had a Vezina finalist as a goaltender, a guy that arguably showed out during the regular season, you know, proven capable 1A goaltender, 1A. 1A. And I think, and certainly a starter at on any other team maybe, looking for starting goaltending, maybe the Edmonton Oilers. And I thought, you know, the theory you put forth was more tantalizing to me of dangling Ullmark and those picks and maybe another player for Draisaitl.
Something like that.
But the longer that series went and the better Skinner looked to them,
well, don't forget,
I thought more remote the possibility was that was going to happen here.
Well, the trade, the draft is, I think, this week, Friday. I think it is. So I think what he wanted, the longer that this Ullman question came up, because there were a lot of teams that were looking at him. Toronto was looking at him. Yeah. I'm sure that Edmonton kind of made a phone call. Okay. Ottawa needs them. They needed them, and they made that move. I think the Bruins could have got, there were a couple of players on Ottawa that they could have got instead of Grzelcyk. Grzelcyk, to me, he doesn't make the Bruins better. Caprasalo doesn't make the Bruins better.
Right.
The 25th draft pick might make the Bruins better 2-3 years from now.
Correct.
So what they made themselves weaker, as we look at it right now, let's see what, there's a trade coming.
I think there might be something that they're going to flip Korpisalo, maybe flip another player, or flip picks.
They won't flip Korpisalo if they can't get a veteran goaltender.
An existing person on the roster, player on the roster right now, who they could trade. You know, I think
Grzelcyk is available to go. I think Forbert is gone.
Yeah.
Oscar Steen they let go, incidentally, to do it. I like Oscar Steen.
Yeah.
So DeBrusk is probably going to go, in my opinion. I hate to see him go,
I like his speed, Al.
Well, I like where he plays in the playoffs. I think he's an up and down player, but he's only 27, 28 years old.
Yeah.
So he's still got his prime years in front of him. Unless you get either a right-handed defenseman or a second-line center.
And that's precisely the thing, Al. I mean, in trading Olmark, like we said, we thought he was going to bring in some frontline player that was gonna help move the needle a little bit, but that's not happened. So I'm of your thought that there are other moves to be made here.
Oh yeah, well I
that
think
there's other things happen. And Al, if it doesn't, then that's going to be a huge disappointment.
Yeah, I think what you really got to take a look at here for the Bruins, okay, is on paper right now, the Bruins were here. Well, let me put it this way. 2 years ago, when they had the best record of all time and they didn't win,
right.
Okay, everybody went, oh, now you lose Bergeron and Krejci. They're going to be a bad team. They still won.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
So they've kind of defied logic. Why? Because they had two goalies and a great defense.
Yeah.
Okay, now, if you look at the picture of 2 years ago, last year slightly worse, but still very well. And now this is where they are.
Yeah, you got an aging Brad Marchand.
Yeah,
who's got a lot of mileage on him now, and
But they got a lot of young players. I think the issue with the Bruins is right now on paper, they're significantly worse than they were last year.
Yeah, but they have some prospects in the pipeline. I mean,
Boosie,
we saw some of them.
I've seen Boosie play.
Yeah,
he's okay.
I mean, we've seen Beecher now. We've seen.
Yeah, but it's goaltending and defense that wins. So Boosie, I've seen a lot of them down in Providence, and he can play.
Yeah.
The problem is he can play against Providence caliber. When he gets up to the bigs, big difference.
Lorai, though, I mean, we got to see.
Oh yeah, well, Lorai, I think, solidified himself as a top line defense. No, probably the second or third defense, but they need a right-handed defenseman. Now, the other thing about Grzelnyk, I think his name is, Kostelic.
Yeah.
He's a 55 to 60% on draws.
Ooh.
So the Bruins had
that was a demonstrable need for that team.
Once they lost Bergeron, they had a problem.
Oh yeah.
Secondly, he's pretty good on penalty killing. So they picked up a kid that I think is going to shine. The Bruin fans are going to like him because he's a hitter.
Yeah.
All right, and I think that helps them when they get to the playoffs, because playoffs, I'll tell you, Florida in that game the other night was all over them in the first period. I mean, Oilers were lucky that didn't come down 3-0 after one.
Right.
I mean, so I think the best team won. I would have liked to seen the Oilers. I wouldn't have bothered me if the Oilers won, trust me.
And it's extraordinary, as you mentioned, that you had two guys who went to high school together, and Jason Tatum and Matthew Tkachuk, who got to experience this together. I'm sure they must have been texting each other back and forth, because it's interesting how the NBA Finals and the NHL, Stanley Cup, they kind of followed similar tracks, parallel tracks, where the team from the East went up 3-0, and then the team from the West finally was heard from, in a rout in that fourth game. And in the fifth game for the Celtics, it was a done deal by coming back, and they won it. Mm-hmm. But not so much for the Panthers, who were taken to Game 7 by Edmonton.
But you see, team comes down. You think about this. So you want to talk about the parallels with the NHL and the NBA.
Yeah.
The team that had the best overall team was the Celtics.
No doubt.
Not Dallas.
No doubt.
The team that had the best overall talent in the NHL was Florida.
So, Al, I ask you this. Was Connor McDavid a worthy Conn Smythe winner?
No. Well, that's a question that it's hard to answer for one reason. Because he clearly stands out. I mean, he had 4 points in 2 games, which you very seldom see in the playoffs. I would say from games 1 through 6, he was the Conn Smythe.
Yeah.
And I thought Bobrovsky was 1 through 5, the Vezina, or the Conn Smythe.
Yeah.
He's already won it twice, so he's not going to get it. But what happened was, the question is,
who votes on that?
How do you give the Conn Smythe to a player on a team that loses?
Right, because if he's the MVP, arguably,
they should have won.
They should have won.
Yeah, but you know what? He's not a Bobby Orr.
But they were. I think Bettman, as he stood there quaking in, I think, fear over the news that he had to deliver, that the Conn Smythe was going to go to a guy from the losing team, and I mean they were throwing rats on him, Well,
I don't think anybody can argue that this might be an aberration, in meaning usually a guy wins it who's on the winning team.
Yeah.
But I hate to say it, but I was watching the first 4 or 5 games, even in the last game. When he's on the ice, he is by far the most spectacular player.
No doubt.
He's the best player in the NHL.
I mean, Al, he was on the doorstep
in
in Game 7. I don't know how many times, and
well,
wasn't able to put wood on it.
The kid there, I forget his name, had the open side,
yes,
and he missed it.
Yes, he whiffed.
That was, I thought, and
that happened several times in those last 5 minutes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And Edmonton was putting so much puck pressure on Bobrovsky, and I thought he's going to crack. He's got to crack. I mean, there was one point where he's on his back, and he has no stick, and yet his defenseman came to his rescue.
It's an amazing thing that you don't see in any other sport, though. When the team's up, you go 2-1.
Yeah.
2 minutes left to play. When do you pull the goalie? When you pull the goalie, one guy makes a mistake, guy shoots it in, the game's over. Right. But the pressure that you can put on the other end, if you can keep it in that end, with the 6-on-5,
yes,
you go, well, the Bruins gave up more 6-on-5s in the last minute or 2 of games.
Yeah. They were susceptible.
I'm telling you, Florida could have given up 1 anyways.
Easy.
In the last 2 minutes. But it's exciting as heck to watch. I think it is.
It is, and it did bring me some enjoyment just to see it go to the 7th game. And so, begrudgingly, congratulations to the Florida Panthers. Hey, Al, switching here to baseball, our America's pastime, as we near the Midsummer Classic, I ask you, is Jarren Duran an all-star? I say unequivocally yes.
I don't know about unequivocally, but I will say this.
Unequivocally, yes.
He can change a game like nobody else.
Right.
One, because he's become a better center fielder, first of all. Okay, he took that ball away, that home run away from the kid the other night. But on the base path is
devastating. And then he's followed up by 2 guys like him.
Well, they've got a lot of guys to go. I'll tell you the other kid, the last of the Mookie Betts kid, this Connor Wong.
Yeah.
You know what? For a kid his size, he don't look like a catcher, for one. He can run. He can play a decent behind the plate, and he can hit. I mean, he leads the team in batting average.
And I love a team that's aggressive on the base paths. I'll take that any day of the week. Gone are the days of the Pablo Sandovals who couldn't run out of a grounder. I mean, now with Jarren Duran, a single can be a triple. A single can easily be a triple. No doubt it's going to be
the team.
A 2-bagger with a stolen base.
The team has changed my perception because they're better to watch than they had been. Why? Because some of these guys, I can now understand what Chaim Bloom was doing. Okay, Rafael,
yeah.
He's a decent ball player. Abreu's a decent ball player.
Great athleticism.
Devis can hit. Okay, he can hit the home run. I'm not sure.
Oh my God! Did he almost hit Ted Williams' seat?
No. He was 50 feet behind Ted. But anyways,
I mean, he's a guy who's come closest, I think, with that shot.
I don't know how he does it with that batting stance. I mean, that's a different kind of batting stance. I mean, he's got to adjust before.
A lot of torque on his oblique.
Anyways, Gonzalez is a decent ball player. I think he's better than I thought he was. I think you know, if you look at it, and now they talked to Tanner Houck.
Houck. I was going to say that. Tanner Houck, all-star.
Well, not only that, was Tanner Houck, when you see him with the goatee, whatever they call it there, and you don't hear him talk and everything, you go, oh, he's kind of an arrogant son of a gun. When you actually hear him talk, he's a very nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they interviewed him last night for about 4 innings.
Yeah.
I didn't think they were ever going to stop talking
I think
to
he
him.
and Jamal Webster have a thing, you know, it's pretty interesting.
But, you know, a little too much of that stuff in a game, I think, because you want to watch the game. You don't want to.
Well, but you're getting some insight, though.
It's okay.
You're getting some insight from the dugout.
Not 2 innings, 3 innings. That's a little goes overboard for me.
What I don't like is what sometimes I think Fox or ESPN does, is when they interview the guys who are playing in the middle of the game. You know, I think they did that to Kike Hernandez one time, and he committed an error as he was talking to the guys.
I think where the Red Sox have to really step back with Bello. He's struggling big time. Yeah. He can't get out of. He has a bad inning, but his bad innings are 5 runs.
Big time.
It's not so bad.
And
when, you know what happens?
I think Cora last night in this loss to the Blue Jays, terrible loss, was kind of mulling the decision. Okay, do I pull the plug now, or do I leave him in and try and let him battle his way out of it? Yeah. You know, and then when it was not going that way, you know, by the time he pulled the plug, it was already done.
He had to pull the plug there with 7 runs in 2 1/3 or whatever. But here's the problem with Bello. He goes with the first 9. Look at him, and they have trouble picking up his because he's got pretty good motion on his pitches. Yeah. They seem to get him the next round. In other words, the second time up, and that's not a good thing. Yeah. You know, a lot of guys like Nolan Ryan used to get better as the game went along. So did Maddox and those guys. They just seem like Sale. Yeah. They get better as the game. Sometimes they have trouble getting started. This kid's okay getting started. He has trouble finishing. Yeah. So that's a problem. I think Pedro is going to have to, because he's kind of been his mentor. Yeah. He's going to have to step back and say, you've got to do some things. You've got to look at tape or whatever it is and figure out either pitches.
Develop his out pitch.
I think it's pitches that
his out pitch. You know, it's got to be like a wipeout slider or.
You heard Tanner Houck last night. He said that the pitching coach told him he should use that. I think it was the
sweeper.
Yeah. And that pitch is very tough to hit because it starts closer to you here on the right-handed side.
And you're like lunging for it at the end.
So anyways,
it's a lot of break on it.
I think in terms of baseball, in my opinion, we lost the greatest player, all-around player that ever played in Willie Mays. Yep. And you know what? Being a East Coast American League fan my whole life, we didn't really have a chance. I didn't because I'm 77. I didn't see the Atlanta, you know, before the Milwaukee Braves played Boston Braves. I didn't see any of that. But Willie Mays played at Fenway back in '61, incidentally. But he was probably the best outfielder that ever played. I mean, the catch that he made off of Vic, I think it was Vic Wirtz in '54. People forget he not only caught the ball over his head and back, he turns around and
makes the throw,
throws to second base and keeps the runner from going. I mean, he was a spectacular player. He would go from first to third better than anybody. Game changer. He was definitely a game changer, and probably was the greatest in terms of changing the perception on black athletes, not Jackie Robinson.
Your Mount Rushmore of MLB would comprise of who?
Well, Ted would be in there as the greatest hitter I ever saw. Okay. Willie Mays, by far the greatest all-around ball player I ever seen. Okay. I would say if I was going to put Babe Ruth has to be in there because he changed the game from a small ball to big ball. I mean, he got home run Baker hit 12 home runs. Yeah. And then along comes a guy like Babe Ruth, and he goes from 27 to 50 to 60 and all that. Lou Gehrig, I think, is probably one of the greatest ball players that ever played. If you look at his stats, He did some things that nobody else could do. He's knocking in 184, 190 runs, 2 back-to-back. He played in 2,000 games. He was 2,130 consecutive games. He was a great first baseman. So I would say...
So no Ty Cobb, no Cy Young, no Pete Rose.
No. I would put Ty Cobb, if you're going to talk about 5.
On a little foothill.
The top 5. Williams was the best hitter I ever saw, okay? Ty Cobb had a 360-something batting average, lifetime.
Yeah.
Ted was 344. Babe Ruth was up there with the batting average.
Ty Cobb with a split grip.
Yeah, but what hurt Willie was that he finished, I think, his career under 300 lifetime.
Yeah.
Now, Joe, everybody talked about Joe DiMaggio. DiMaggio was a 325 lifetime hitter.
How much of that was a function of where he played, too, in Candlestick?
Well, some of it had to be, but I mean, when he first came up.
You look at the guys who played their careers in Coors.
Who was on deck when Bobby Thompson hit the home run, do you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
You know who was pitching?
It was Willie Mays who was on deck.
Ralph Branco was pitching.
Yeah.
And Bobby Thompson.
Isn't that Bobby Valentine's father-in-law?
Willie Mays was on deck.
He was on deck.
And God knows, anybody who said Bobby Thompson wasn't really the threat. Willie was the threat.
It was amazing to see.
So anyways, and I think they did a nice thing for him in Alabama. They kind of devoted that whole thing.
Well, I mean, it was to celebrate the Negro Leagues and him, but then when he passed, you know,
I saw something.
They kind of turned
in a short period of time. I saw something I had never seen, and a guy I wasn't particularly crazy about was Reggie Jackson. I think was on TV.
Yeah.
And he talked about
he was
how
very frank about that.
difficult it was, and who were the people who made it easy. White people, he said, who made it easy for him, but he said, you know, we couldn't go to a hotel, we couldn't stay at a restaurant.
Yes.
He said, and I don't think a lot
let's
of people
never
understood
forget that. Let's never forget that those people had it hard.
Oh, really difficult, and I think that. You know, for that, I say Jackie Robinson was a trailblazer. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But the guys like Roy Campanella, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, guys like that.
They advanced the game, too. They advanced the game.
Well, they looked, and people started to say, these guys can play with anybody.
Right.
So, you know, the argument about the people who played in the Negro League should be in the Hall of Fame, I have a little with that, in that all the guys that played in the Negro League, there were some great ball players that should have been in the major leagues, but there were a lot of guys that were playing in the Negro League just to fill up the
Flotsam and Jetsam.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe they wouldn't have been better. I mean, a guy like Gibson. Yeah. But so I thought it was interesting to hear him talk. I couldn't believe how down to earth he was on that. And there was Ortiz was on that panel.
And they were all in awe of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. As they well should be. Well, you know, it's been another fast and raucous time here. And we want to thank you for spending your time with us. And we look forward to the next time here on Stepping Up to the Plate. All right, everyone, take care.